Welcome to a new episode of Shortcut, a podcast that takes you on a shortcut to developer experience, developer productivity, and product engineering. I'm Morten.
And I'm Marilyn. Welcome to the show. We have Susanne Kaiser with us. Hello, Susanne. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Could you tell a little bit about yourself and the work that you do and how you're helping teams with dealing with complex systems?
Yeah, my pleasure. So, I am Susanne Kaiser from Hamburg, Germany, and I am an independent tech consultant, but I started in computer science decades ago. I have to say decades. Not that young anymore. I'm sorry about that. But I started as a software developer 20 years ago, and in software development and software architecture. Became a tech lead, also became a startup CTO back then, and then started in 2018 as an independent tech consultant, helping organizations to optimize the flow of change and to design and build and evolve adaptive sociotechnical systems.
We talk a lot about developer productivity, both here in the podcast, but also between me and Marilyn. But when we talk about developer productivity, it's often very much based around an individual and how an individual developer can perform or get into that magical zone of being in the zone and do work very focused. But when we talk about of having a fast flow of change, like you talk about in your talks, that's more on a team level, right? Or more on an organizational perspective. Can you elaborate a little bit about what it means to have fast flow, or what it means when we talk about flow?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you already pointed out, it's about the team perspective or the team consideration in terms of like how they are aligned to a fast flow of change. And ideally, in an ideal situation, teams should fully own the entire end-to-end flow from first idea to deliver and generate value to the customers, and with minimal interruptions and with minimal bottlenecks along the way. Teams should ideally own the fully end-to-end flow from designing, developing, testing, deploying, releasing, and also operating and monitoring the services and run the services they are responsible for, with minimal interaction or with minimal handover to other teams, so that they can stay in their flow of change without waiting for others. For example, that they don't have to hand over work at an early or later stage of flow to other teams, so that the other teams do something in their flow, and the teams have to work until these teams have completed their work and hand it back to us, and then we can complete and continue with our work. Instead, it's more like aims for making the teams then more self-sufficient and autonomous, and reducing their cognitive load so that they are able to focus on a fast flow of change and with minimal interruptions between teams.
And we heard you talk a lot about domain-driven design over the years. And now there is Wardley Mapping and domain-driven design, and then Wardley Mapping, domain-driven design, and Team Topologies. Could you please give us a brief explanation of these different approaches, and then what led you into combining these three concepts into what you would call an architecture for flow?
Yeah. It started when I was back, in a couple of years ago, when I used to be a startup CTO. It was about driving a journey towards from monolithic big ball of mud, right? Legacy system can easily evolve in a big ball, tightly coupled ball of mud, where you have unpredictable side effects when you change some parts, and this system can have unpredictable side effects on other parts of the system due to tight change coupling. And we wanted to move away from our legacy system and from monolithic system towards microservices back then. So, and when when we ran into or explored the microservices field, I came along domain-driven design, and domain-driven design provides patterns, practices, principles that helps you to design software that tries to capture related business behavior together, and, for example, in bounded context. So there's one aspect of domain-driven design. Domain-driven design tries to capture your problem domain into software that is closely aligned to the business needs, to the business strategy. And And also that was the first time that I was in contact with domain-driven design, reading all the books, and also tried to find then domain-specific themes to split our system apart into modular components and to enforce modularity in our system. So that was the first time about microservices, but then also serverless technologies came up, and I was interested in that field as well, if that's explored in that way. And when I went to serverless conferences, that's where I met you, Morten, then you also ran automatically into Simon Wardley. So back then,
like in all serverless conferences, in I think 2018 or 19, all serverless conferences had a talk on Simon Wardley.
Yeah. So on Simon Wardley, he developed a business strategy framework called Wardley Mapping, and he that's kind of like a collection of patterns, principles, practices to design effective business strategies that follows a strategy cycle and goes through different sections of a strategy cycle, from purpose, landscape, climatic patterns, doctrinal principles, and leadership, and so on. So it is, and I was watching his talks back then, and that sounds interesting, but how do I apply to my own context? And then I was like struggling a little bit, but then I tried to apply it to my own context. So, and what I did was I modified Wardley Map itself. A Wardley Map itself is visualizing a business landscape in which an organization is operating and competing, and it's composed of a y-axis reflecting the value chain with user needs, and components fulfilling the user needs directly or indirectly. And then these components of the value chain are mapped to evolution stages from genesis with brand new things, then custom build, then product and rental, such as off-the-shelf products, open source software solution, commodity and utility on the right. And you try to map those components through these evolution stages to later also derive build, buy, or outsource decisions, where you should strategically invest your most major development efforts. And I was thinking, that is great. I can combine it with domain-driven design, because the user and the user needs, which are usually reflecting the anchor of a Wardley map, can also represent the problem domain and from domain-driven design. And domain-driven design also comes with subdomains or subdomain types, for example, core, supporting, and generic. And they also have this notion on the core domain providing competitive advantage. That is where you have to strategically invest the most your development efforts, investments. And then supporting subdomain, that could be candidates. Maybe we can, if we have, can prioritize our supporting subdomain related solutions, then let's use off-the-shelf products or open source services, open source solutions. Or if it's not possible, we might need to custom build it, and also with generic subdomains that are good candidates for using existing solutions or cloud-hosted services. So, and I was thinking, that is it complements each other. Because it does, it goes into the same direction. So, and visualize it on a Wardley map. So what I usually do is then I try to reflect the bounded context on a Wardley map as well. And then there was a missing piece, and that was the team organization, because as Conway's law states, that the communication structure mirrors then the system design later on. And then Team Topologies came along in 2019, end of 2019, with a book, and that was then the missing puzzle piece to bring together. So bringing the three perspective of business strategy with Wardley Mapping, then software architecture, software design with domain-driven design, but also then the team organization with Team Topologies. And Team Topologies provides also patterns about team types. So they offered various team types and also interaction modes, how the teams shall interact with each other, and the team types of streamlined teams and platform teams, enabling teams, and complicated subsystem teams, and how they are interacting with each other, and when do they collaborate, working closely together, or when they need to, another service might provide an excessive service with self-service capabilities, or enabling teams help to engage usually with its internal coaches, help to upskill the other teams. So I know that was then the missing puzzle piece, bringing them together in order to design, build, and evolve adaptive sociotechnical systems that are optimized for fast flow of change.
Yeah. I remember also that when Team Topologies came out, that something that really resonated with me, their way of describing the stream-aligned teams and platform teams. I think that was really interesting. And I remember also following like all the material that came out, and whenever there was a presentation online, going after that. And now there's the Team Topologies Academy with a lot of videos that I've also gone through. So there's a lot of material out there to go through. And I think it's really interesting. And I think it resonates more and more as you get into software development, especially in bigger setups with more teams, and you suddenly start seeing platform needs and those types of things.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear when you go out and talk with customers or the clients that hire you. You obviously have a lot of things in your tool belt, but how do you approach a customer? Where do you start with all of the bits and pieces that you have in your tool belt?
Yeah, I typically start I try to start with the current situation, with the status quo, where they are right now. And typically start with like, what are the current teams, how they are organized, what are the responsibilities, but also meeting then the teams where they are and interviewing then teams in regards to what is blocking their current flow of work. So because mostly teams know what is slowing them down, and interviewing them directly. So what would you say, what do you identify as blockers to your flow from your daily work perspective? What should be minimized, but also what works very well in terms of like, what should we preserve, what should we keep for our ideal future? And that's starting from the teams of today, and also bringing then also the user perspective as well. So what we as a team, so we usually we have either external customers, but also internal customers. Maybe as a platform team, we have our other teams that we want to support, right? And I try then to identify like what problems we want to solve, like what are our users that we want to serve, and what user needs do they have, coming then to the value chain of our Wardley map, so they are blend in then thoroughly then the Wardley map, or trying to identify like this, reflecting the current status quo from user needs, and what components are we providing right now to fulfill the user needs directly or indirectly. So to derive this chain of components that help to create value to the user needs and satisfy the user needs, and then also try to reflect it, like what are we currently custom building, where do we use off-the-shelf products and open source solutions and cloud-hosted services, and then ask questions. Then I blend in typically the try to categorize the problem space and subdomain types. So what are user needs that relate to core domain specific domains? So what is providing competitive advantage if we have fulfilled these user needs? What could be part of the supporting subdomains that supports the core domain offerings that are non-differentiating but specialized? What are generic subdomain related user needs and that are like neither specialized nor differentiating? So where we can use like off-the-shelf products or cloud-hosted services. And then I try to go further down, switching to the solution space, how we have solved this. So if it's maybe a legacy system where it's all mingled together in one monolithic big ball of mud, then I blend in then how to modularize the solution space and to target better our strategic investment, but also find better team ownership boundaries. So with modularity, we can establish good team ownership boundaries, and beside all other good aspects about it as well. And that's, for example, they bring in, like, depending on the context, event storming sessions, or I then facilitate with the teams to drive together with the teams that are involved in this change, to derive then bounded context that tries to encapsulate specific business behavior, and these bounded contexts are then later good candidates for team ownership boundaries. And I place them on the Wardley map, and then I ask questions again for the future business landscape. So for the future, shall we still custom build it? Is it delivering differentiating value? and combining it with the subdomain types. And then I go further down the value chain as well, because it's not only related to bounded context, but to the entire value chain. So usually they depend on foundational infrastructure components. The bounded contexts are later on, when we come to team constellation, good ownership boundaries for streamlined teams, but they can't work in isolation. They need support from other teams, for example, platform teams providing self-service capabilities that the streamlined teams can easily consume, helping them delivering their work without interaction with other teams and with minimal interruption, and also reducing their cognitive load, increasing their autonomy. And I go further down the value chain to identify those candidates for potential platforms. And then deriving with the teams again, a future idea future where we see like what could be candidates for platform teams, what could be candidates for streamlined teams, and how they are interacting. And then also create a different view of the landscape from the external customer view with maybe one or multiple other Wardley maps, and then going into the internal view, like where then the teams become the user of the services that the platform team provides. So it's a combination of like having different views on their system from external. It starts from the external customer view, but then also blends into the internal team view.
I'm curious about like when we talk about the user needs, and like from your experience, how aware are the teams, like with everyone in the team, also developers, of the user needs? Do you see any kind of patterns? Are they surprised when the product owners start talking, or are they very aware of user needs? Or
I have to can talk about on my own experience. When I was a junior developer, I was really, really keen on very shiny technology to exploit that, and I didn't care about user needs or whatever. So, but over the time, over my journey, I was more and more like, why no one is using my services I provide? Okay, I have to have the user perspective in mind. And I guess it is it could be very frustrating if you build something and no one is using, right? Because it does not meet user needs. So it should be something, should be shifted left in the software development process. Are we fulfilling user needs? And I guess that is still a challenge, I would say, to create this awareness of what are our users. So sometimes when I ask teams like, we don't know. Maybe we have only one user, but when we have this collaborative sessions, then first they have the assumption we have only one type of users, and then after the session, we have 10 different user types. So there's, for everyone, is a kind of surprise on what user needs those have, and that's the reason why I prefer to start with Wardley Mapping, because it starts from the user perspective. And as, for example, Clayton Christensen, the inventor of the Jobs to be Done series, stated, people buy products and services to get a job done, right? And if we don't help the users to accomplish a job, and that is also required to identify then the user need as desired outcome they want to achieve in order to when getting a job done. So that's very crucial. Otherwise, they don't use it. So if we also for internal projects as well, we can just can create a platform. But if no one is using it, then it makes no sense. It has no user adoption.
Yeah. And you mentioned that initially you worked with a startup. You were a CTO, and that's where you got the inspiration. And I also work with startups. I work with big enterprises, and I'm sure there are a lot of things where they differ in the way to approach this, but there are also a lot of similarities. Do you see any patterns? Do you think that there's a certain approach that only works for digitally native startups, but won't really be a good fit with large, maybe traditional enterprises that are starting to transform their digital organizations into becoming product-centric or platform-centric? Is there some common ground that they can learn from each other? And how do you approach these two different types of enterprises?
Yeah, that is a great question. So it is really challenging because we have different startup, scale up, and growth related organizations are having. The more people, the bigger the company becomes. You have more people involved, more interaction paths, and you have to split teams where you were one team before in the startup context, right?
Yeah.
So when you become a scale up, you have to divide teams, and you have to divide your problem domain and assign it to different teams instead of like one cozy team. And what has worked in one team does not work with multiple teams. You have to then processes become more like to focus on efficiency. Then you have to also become aware that you can't directly go to your teammate sitting right next to you, maybe because that is not like interrupting them in their flow, right? What was possible back then is not possible anymore. And this also applies to large enterprises, where also depending also on the domain, if there's for compliance reason, you have to follow some regulations and also it's a different dynamic, I would say, definitely. So in a startup scenario, you can try out things very easily. That's the reason why you're a startup, because you're still dealing with the unknowns. You don't know. You're still in the exploration phase. But to become a large corporate, it takes definitely decades. But it is more that you have different evolution stages involved. You still have some areas where you can apply agile methodologies like you have in startups environments, but you also have parts of your value chains are more like stable, standardized, and it doesn't make sense to apply agile methods to that one. Maybe less lean methods are more applicable to that one. So you can't have one method for all different areas in your organization. And I guess the bigger you become, you have to be aware that also your evolution stages that are involved in your product portfolio are different as well.
Right. And another thing is going back to identifying value and user needs. When you work with maybe a digital startup, it's, I would guess, a little easier for the entire team to understand what this product is about, who our users are, because that's inherently the reason why you have the company. Whereas in traditional enterprises, maybe that enterprise is for in retail or in the medical field, which is not directly within software engineering. But then you have a software engineering team, and then now you have to map out your user needs and your business needs and your values from your core business versus the actual user needs of the software that you're building. So how do you actually kind of orchestrate this understanding between these teams in the enterprise when you talk to when you help teams along this pattern? So how do you kind of emphasize or give them the tools for them to map out the value of the software or the systems that they're building versus the actual value that the traditional business is providing their users?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to a shared vision and also the purpose. So for example, Simon Wardley, one section of a strategy cycle is purpose. Like, what is the why of our business? Why do we exist? So, and I guess that is, or for example, the fifth discipline described also in this book is also described that the shared vision, and they are closely aligned. So to as a inner motivation for everyone in the organization, what we want to achieve and what we aspire to, how do we envision our future? I guess it's more about more related. The more larger you become, I guess, the more important becomes the purpose and the vision, the shared vision behind your organization in order to, thrive or drive your motivation within teams. So what is the reason why we get up? And also definitely what is also the organizational culture is also something that has to be aligned. Like, for example, Ron Brestrom, he had established these 3 different organizational or cultural topologies in terms of like pathological, bureaucratic, and generative culture, and also to be aware of it. Like, in what field do you play? For example, if you want to establish a culture of deep trust and safety thinking, then it should be aligned to generative culture where you aspire, where continuous shared learning experimentation are fostered and favored, and where you learn from previous experiences in order to improve your processes, your software, your solutions, your team, and your culture.
When we talk about big organizations, I feel like we often also talk about legacy systems. But I think another aspect is also just the modernization of the organization. Let's say going into like maybe more team topologies type setup, that these product teams or scrum teams, they might be called, also need to learn how to become streamlined teams and what that means in terms of their area of responsibility and the things that they might usually have been working on, or maybe if when they were in a scale up or startup, they were working on all the things, but now maybe their focus is a little bit more slim, and they maybe need to also learn to become more focused on what is it that provides value and not working on all the things around it, and also being open to that there's actually a platform team that can do some heavy lifting for us so that we don't have to do it ourselves. I'm curious, like also if when you talk with teams, if they're running into these things when you start analyzing and then seeing, okay, well, here it actually makes sense to introduce a platform team. We might start with a thin platform to get started, but there might be some aspects of taking things out of an existing team. And do you see that, and how do they react to that? That things are kind of taken away from them?
Yeah, different reactions. So some are very emotionally bond to their platform that they have from the very get-go. They were involved in developing these shared services for others. And now they have to let go, and that other teams can then take over. So it is, so that's what I meant. Like, for example, we were one big team, and now we have to talk to another team. So, and it's different, yeah, because you're growing. So that is that is the reason you can't have being responsible for the entire team, for the entire system anymore as one team. We have to decompose it into modular components, and also into autonomous cross-functional streamlined teams that are supported by platform teams. So that is the consequence of growing, and it's also a benefit. I mean, your legacy system, I usually tell everyone you should appreciate your legacy system because it made you successful. That's the reason why we are meeting right now, because you have no growing pains. But then also the next consequence is that we have to split it somewhere. Otherwise, we can't grow anymore that way we want to grow, and we are becoming inefficient. So it is, even though it is, we have to split up teams, and that they can focus more on their streams of changes, on their maybe bolded context they're responsible for. That requires that they have to let go other parts where then other teams can help them, reducing their cognitive load, and also maybe improve it, the platform they are relying on. Also, it is also then Simon Wardley comes also with different. He calls it think, aptitude, and attitude. It's about that not only skill set are relevant to compose teams, but also the mindset in terms of like the preference, if I like to explore new things, or if I have more the preference to stabilize or mature components. And this is really also relevant when we compose teams. For example, if you're a team that likes to, or if you're an individual that prefers to explore new things and also familiar or happy with failure, then you might be your responsibility might differ. Like you might be responsible for components that change a lot, where you are dealing with unknowns in your value chain. On the other side, you have individuals that prefer to stabilize things and to stabilize and improve things, or to mature and optimize other components. And we have different. So he's talking about explorer, villagers, and town planner mindset, and every one of them is equally important to the organization. That is also something that we have to take into consideration. If so those that want to stabilize things, that they can provide a platform, just a stable platform to other teams that then like to explore more and have to let go this aspect as well. So yeah, it is different skill sets, but also different preferences are involved as well.
There are some teams where maybe most of the team members would be explorer, and then there's some platforms or products where it makes sense if most of the members are maybe the ones who like just maintaining what's already there. But it's so in your experience, what do you think is ultimately responsible for looking at the organization and looking at the people and kind of matching them up and then putting them into the teams? Is it kind of a self-driven, or is it the engineering managers? Where in the organization can we expect that this kind of team composition needs to be tackled?
There are different approaches, and also Heidi Helfand also has described it in her dynamic reteaming book as well, different levels of selecting team members or signing team members to teams. So I guess the level where we have the highest level of flexibility is the self-selection, that team members can select their teams that they want to become member of. Another one, I guess, on the other side of the spectrum is when someone says, we have established these teams and you will be in that team. So no question. So that is the opposite of it.
Yes.
And you can also have a mixture, like, for example, where you as engineering manager or something like that, you decide we have this, we come up with an idea where we have this team structure, and teams can give your input where they would like to be. They consider your opinion on where you as a team member want to be, and then they decide what team. And so I moderated usually sessions where the self-selection process, also with another great colleague of mine, Nina, she's also helping with that, facilitating then these team organization sessions with self-selections, bringing like who wants to be in what team. And also what we say is, I don't know in what team if I make a mistake and I don't want to be in that team, but I prefer to be in that team, I can't decide. And what I say, that you have the opportunity of switching. So it should not be like every week. But if you consider like, now I would like to, for my personal growth, I want to maybe switch to an infrastructure team, and that is also possible. So, for example, Team Topologies says it's not static teams; they are stable. They should, but the team members can switch over time as long as it's not like every week. But it's and I guess that took a lot of pressure off the decision whether make a right decision right now or not. The opportunity to switch, if they are selecting, as they are choosing this opportunity or not, but at least it took a lot of pressure off from their shoulders or from the decision to be made.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I guess we should almost provide like a little reading list for our listeners with the, I know that at the dynamic reteaming book, you also have in your slides as references. So there's some books to read. I know I already have it on my to-read list, but that's kind of ever-growing. But
yeah, mine too. Like, oh no, I have to read that book again. So, and also like this one. So it's really like you feel always FOMO if you're not reading that book. Yeah. I definitely can provide some links.
Yeah, and I feel like we can keep talking, and we could have a whole podcast just about platforms and platform teams. In wrapping up, we usually ask our guests to provide our listeners with a shortcut. So with your experience in fast flow, can you provide our listeners with a shortcut to achieving a fast flow of change in their teams?
Good question. Well, so yeah, I come back to the strategy cycle from Simon Wardley, where one of the section is, the first section is purpose, the why of our business, and the last section is then leadership, where we have then the business strategy involved and where we act upon it. So and sometimes as people like go directly from purpose to leadership making a strategic decision without going to the entire cycle, understanding a landscape, knowing what external forces are impacting a landscape, and also applying doctrinal principles. So, and going directly from there it's more a strategy by gut feeling. And of course, you can do some shortcuts, but then it's more like a gut feeling approach, which could be totally off your reality, and that you have to, even though like with technical debt, if you do shortcuts today, you will pay off. If you don't repair it along your journey and refactor in time, then it becomes a pain, and it's also applicable to that one. So, for example, let's place some boundaries here and push some teams here, and without any real thought into that one, like how it looked like from also the flow of change perspective, and that could also then slow you down instead of accelerate your flow. And of course, like the ideal future, it's all based on assumptions, right? So even when you go into these sessions to design your ideal future, it's still based on an assumption. But we have to, while we are trying to hopefully in small increments try to implement the flow of change, then we gather then the experience along the way, along our transformation, and can course correct it immediately. And the more we have to course correct and then again reorganize, I guess it really can drain a lot of energy.
Yeah. So I guess in summary, don't take shortcuts. But be thorough in.
Yeah, you can, but be aware of the risk.
Yeah.
Don't take shortcuts, but listen to the Shortcut podcast to learn more. So thank you so much, Susanne, for joining us today. I feel like we only scratched the surface of this work that you're doing. So how can our listeners reach you?
I am available on LinkedIn, of course. So please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. And also, yes, the social media platforms has changed now. I'm not active on Twitter, X, or whatever, but on the other, like Blue Sky, something like that. So please feel free to reach out to on LinkedIn. I guess LinkedIn is the platform that I'm most active on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.